Morning everyone, welcome back to the shed. Hope you're well today. I thought I'd take a little bit of time this morning to do another inbox review following on from the Tomcat that I reviewed last year before I built that for MAI. I thought you'd like to take a look at another swing wing jet, and that is this thing here. This is Kitty Hawk's Su-17M3, or more pithily, the fitter. This has been supplied to us by my good friend Andrew Hills from Antiques Model Shop in the UK. He's offered to let us have a look at one of these and build it for MAI. So I'd like to thank him before I start, and hope that we can do it some justice over the coming weeks, both in this video and also in an in-depth build that will take place as part of Model Airplane International's roster of features over the next possibly 2 issues. Certainly looking at taking a detailed go through of this in the May issue, and also perhaps in the June issue as well. We'll see how that kind of pans out over the next couple of weeks. I only received this morning, so I've just done some kind of notes on this and had a detailed look at it over the last 2 or 3 hours. So hopefully you'll enjoy seeing a little bit more of this kit. It's a big old box of parts, there's no doubt about it, and this box is crammed full of bits and pieces. So what we have here is a depiction by Kitty Hawk in 48 scale of essentially 4 versions of the stock Su-17. They've replicated in this box the Su-17 M3, M3R, M4 and M4R. Okay, so the versions differ internally mainly. There are some detail changes around the airframe which Kitty Hawk call out, and those changes have kind of dictated the way that they've approached this kit. The basic version within this is the M3. That's the fitter H version of this, and then they offer a couple of the later M4 variants, which is the fitter K, which is the one that's referred to on the box. Like I say, all of those changes are included within the kit, but essentially it's the same airframe, but just with kind of minor variations in detail across its surface. Taking a more detailed look at the kit, you notice a number of things that I think typify modern 21st century products. Firstly, it's beautifully moulded. There is no doubt about that. Right across the board, taking a look at the parts in the box, you see some really gorgeous pieces, and the levels of detail are extremely high. The kit itself is moulded in a pale grey plastic, which kind of gives you almost an intellectual legs up anyway, because it shows off a lot of the finer detail. When you start to dig around into that, you see features that perhaps other kits would have kind of left alone. In many ways it's more detailed and more complex than the Tamiya Tomcat that I took a look at last year. Certainly the cockpit is more involved, there's a lot more inside for you to deal with. I think almost 40 parts make up the cockpit, and that includes a really detailed K36 DM ejector seat that's in there that combines plastic parts with photo etched strapping. So right from the bat you're starting to see that the kit does include a lot of pieces and a lot of fine detail to get your kind of head around. The second thing that you notice is that Kitty Hawk have decided to take a route offered by other companies such as Trumpeter in having runner tabs moulded inside the edges of the parts. What that means is that when you remove the parts from the runners, those tabs are located on the inner face, so that there's no scarring on the outside of the part. Now, although that can be a bit of a nuisance to remove those small sections, with side cutters you can easily remove them and then sand and flush. What it does mean is that for at least one of the versions in here that's aluminium, you're not going to see any of that kind of scarring on the outside of the parts that can sometimes be difficult to disguise. I kind of like the idea of that. It's not always needed. I didn't feel that it was needed on some of the internal parts, but certainly some of the external sections. I think that's a worthwhile design inclusion on the larger parts. There are a number of areas where those tabs work their way into more visible sections. There's one in particular that fits within a recess that holds up the reaction jack for the canopy. That's a bit of a frustration, but I don't see any problems with removing that that small trace of plastic within what is a quite tiny area, and certainly once the reaction jack is placed into there, you probably won't see any of the damage there anyway. The airframe is covered in very petite panel lines and rivets. There's nothing in the kit, and there's certainly nothing on the surface of the airframe that gives me pause to think it's overdone or overworked. Sometimes with kits that come from this part of the world, the riveting can be rather more obvious than perhaps we would like, but in this case it's really delicately done right across the surface of the model. So I think that will look great under paint. It'll also be deep enough so that it can take a wash if you want to go down that route. Modern day finishing techniques almost demand that's part and parcel of a build. It doesn't have to be, but it tends to be, and in this case I think the panel lines are deep enough and defined well enough that will be an easy part of the finishing process. The kit is broken down in such a way as to offer other versions when they should come along. The fuselage is broken down into three sections. The first section encloses the cockpit and the intake, mid-section holds the wings, and the rear section that holds the Lyulka 21 turbojet that is offered as part of the kit by Kitty Hawk. They've replicated that engine and it fits within that rear section. Now part of that design is a forced need to ensure that everything kind of lines up, and I think that is where the first part of some forward planning is going to be needed with this kit. Having a fuselage broken up in that way forces you to deviate from the suggested instruction procedure. I think you would need to do that anyway, because having had a look through the instructions, Kitty Hawk guides you to complete the entire fuselage and add all of the smaller parts around it before you fit the wings into place. So there's an absurdity to the way that they've approached the breakdown and then construction of their kit when it comes to the instruction sheets. So I think deviation from that much earlier on in the procedure will pay dividends as well. So what that means is that you'll need to take those three sections on each half of the fuselage, glue them together, and then create long sections, and then create all of the internal parts that go within the fuselage. The way that the kit is moulded and the draft angles that have been included on the edges of all of the major parts should ensure that that's not a difficult process. What you will need to do before you start the construction of this is to remove the three fuselage sections that have the holes in for the location pins for the other half. Then lay those down onto a flat surface like your desk, line them all up, glue them together to create a section, leave that to dry, and then tape the other three sections into place against that using that completed fuselage half as your template. Glue the other three, hold the other three sections against that piece, run a bead of glue around, hold it in place with some tape, and then just remove the two sections. That way you've got two long fuselage halves onto which you can then add the upper spinal sections, which are split into three. The front part of the spine is in two halves. There's a centre section that blends over both halves, and then there's a rear section that blends in with the fit. The reason again for doing that, I guess, is for later versions to be done, but also in this case because the rear part of the spine incorporates an air intake that is only used on the M4 variant. On the M3 there is no intake on the base of the fin. So you could, along with that, you could then glue the fin into place, and then you've got two complete sections, and then you can work off those sections. I see no benefit whatsoever from attempting to create the nose, glue all the cockpit into place, paint all that, and then glue the middle section together, and then glue the tail section together, and then try and fit all of those together. There's no way of lining those up. Common sense dictates to me that I would ensure that the fit was such that the joints fell on those natural panel lines, and then if there is any adjustment and is any filling, it runs along the top of the spine and doesn't run around the fuselage. So that's the first thing that I would do with that. As far as the engine's concerned, the engine is virtually invisible in this kit. Unless you're going to open up panels to show that off, I would just kind of bodge that all together, glue it all together, and then fit that into place. Now within the fuselage there are a number of compromises, and one of which is the shock cone that holds the radar in place on a real aircraft. On a real Sukhoi 17-22, that cone is held in place with two triangular sections, one above and one below, that split the air around the cone and then back into the intake before it goes into the AL-21 turbojet at the back of the aircraft. In the kit, Kitty Hawk's designers have simplified that to a degree where all you get is the shock cone, and then that's held into place by two kind of square sockets and rectangular recesses inside the fuselage. So it's kind of trapped into place. What that will mean is that you'll need to glue it on one side, hold it in place, hold the other section in place so that it's kind of located, and then leave it there until it's set, and then once it is set you can then apply some glue to the other side, and that will hold that in place. That won't get rid of the rather open nature of the intake. It certainly won't cover over the missing sections within that intake. Now it could be argued that it's a fairly small section within the model, isn't really going to be too visible, but I think it is an omission that's worth pointing out. Personally, it's not going to be a big deal to me because I'm simply going to build an intake blank for that. I'm going to build a circular plate and I'm going to cover over the shock cone. Not only will that hide the discrepancy within the intake, it'll also add a flash of colour in the nose of the aircraft. So I think I'm going to do that. I may well also cover over the jet pipe as well and have that as a red plated section as well. Moving on, you are then encouraged to build the wings. The wings on this aircraft are variable geometry, move backwards and forwards. They don't move into recessed sections in the fuselage in the same way that a Tomcat does, but they kind of move backwards a few degrees. The kit allows some movement because it's got shallow peg and socket joints that combine the sweeping section of the wing with the fixed section that joins onto the fuselage. There's no way to get those wings to move at the same time, obviously, because that would incorporate a huge amount of complex geometry and cogs within the fuselage, and I don't think there's any way of doing that. So they will be kind of free moving, or you just fix them whichever way you want. Given that the kit offers separate slats, flaps and ailerons, I would imagine that most people will probably just fix them in the forward position, have all of those kind of things drooped out, and then move on and finish it in that way. That's certainly how the review model is going to be finished. Along with the option to have those wings moving backwards and forwards, the kit offers a detailed undercarriage bay, and it also offers gun bays as well that fit underneath the fixed portion of the wing. Along with those details, the designers have allowed the modeler the option, and I guess this is where they came up with the idea that you could fix the wings in place afterwards, for the wings to fit into large recessed areas within the fuselage, so they slot into an aerofoil shaped depression in the side of the fuselage. What this allows is a really strong joint between those wings and the fuselage section. It's tempting to think that that may well be a usable feature later on when it comes to masking and that kind of thing. I haven't really looked into that any further, so I'm not sure about that at the minute. It may well be that this kit can be built in a slightly modular way, in the same way that the Tomcat could be, but I'm not completely convinced at the moment. So I'll look into that when I'm putting the kit together and kind of see how that goes. With the airframe finished, you then move on to smaller details, the first of which is the undercarriage. The undercarriage is extremely fine in this kit and extremely well detailed. On a real Su-17, the Russian designers who created the aircraft use a system that has been used on their jets for some time, and that is a vertical leg section that has a pivoting lower joint on the bottom of it, onto which the wheel fits. What that means in miniature is that those legs are often quite fragile and they're quite delicate. Kitty Hawk have ramped up that pressure slightly by making their undercarriage leg a very delicate aspect of the model, almost in scale with the real thing. At first I was a bit concerned about this. I had a look at the instructions, and I had a look at the way that the undercarriage legs fit into the bays on the underside of the wings, but also what would allow me to strengthen those legs to stop them moving around. The first thing that allows you to strengthen those legs is that the main undercarriage door is fixed to the undercarriage leg. It's glued in place. So what that means is that that delicate joint at this point here is no longer delicate, because it's glued in place against a retaining door that fixes it firmly into the correct location. There's kind of no way that it can buckle under, because it's held in place. That'll either be done with liquid glue or with super glue, but whatever, it will allow it to create a stronger joint at that point. So that leaves the upper section where it joins into the wheel bay. That joint is not massively strong in itself because the leg is quite delicate at that point, but it is then reinforced by actuators that fit around it. I think there are two that go into the leg. They will then fix that in place. I'm not convinced that the model is massively heavy anyway, so whether or not there will be an issue with those legs, don't know. Nose gear is similarly delicate, but again, I don't feel that there's going to be any problems with it sitting on its undercarriage, even with potential weight that might need to be added into there. It's unfortunately one of those things that kit designers have got to deal with some of these subjects. When you look at a real aircraft, you look at one of these aircraft, you can see how delicately those undercarriage legs are created. In reality, there's not a lot of wiggle room for kit designers to create stronger, more substantial units to hold the model. If we were to do that, then reviewers like myself would say, well, I think the undercarriage legs are really heavy-handed. They're not at all as delicate as the rest of the model. So you kind of, damned if you do, damned if you don't. In this case, I think it may well be all right, but the only way for me to find that out is to actually put the model together. Once you've got all of those kind of things done, then you move on to weapons. At least 50% of this kit is weaponry. Looking through the box, this, 4 runners in total, are essentially weapons for this aircraft. There's very little on these runners that isn't a staple part of Russian aviation's arsenal. I can't see very much that's kind of missing from this. It's an astonishing array of rockets, bombs, drop tanks, rocket launchers, that kind of thing. So everything that is carried by the aircraft is included in the kit. There is, however, some confusion. I looked through the instructions today, and there are, along with the constructional notes, which you'll see here, these are the black and white drawings. The kit includes, within its centre section, really detailed colour scheme information for the aircraft that are supplied. Now within that, there are drawings for the missiles, essentially to allow you to paint them and to decal them. And within that drawing were references to 3 SPPU-22 gun pods, 3 of them. So I had a look at those and I thought, well, they don't really look like they're the same. That's because they're not. The kit only includes 1 SPPU-22 gun pod. The other 2 things that are in there, that are referred to those within the painting instructions, are a KKR-1T reconnaissance pod that fits underneath the centerline pylon, and also an SBS 141 jamming pod that fits underneath one of the shoulder pylons on the fixed section of the wing. Those are, however, listed in the construction notes. So although it's confusing within the painting section, this bit here, it's not confusing when it comes to the actual construction. You can see here, this is the construction notes for the KKR-1T reconnaissance pod. So you can see that although they've kind of got a bit confused, it's not insurmountable, and it will give you an idea of what you're doing. The detail across all of the weapons is absolutely sensational, completely superb right from start to finish. In fact, I would imagine that once the kit's finished, these will just go back in the box, and I'll use these as a stock of weapons for other Russian builds should they come down the line as the years kind of progress. Essentially what the kit supplies, along with the plastic parts for the actual airframe, are 2 sets of weapons, 2 full weapon sets. And that's kind of extraordinary when you start to price these kind of things up. How much these would cost if they were in a Hasegawa box is anybody's guess. The fact that they're included as part and parcel of this basic kit is extraordinary. So they're a real bonus, and I really like those. Along with the plastic parts, the kit offers 6 different aircraft on its decal sheet. It offers 5 Russian aircraft and a Ukrainian version that's spread across those 4 versions that I mentioned earlier on. So within the box you have a number of camouflaged Russian aircraft. You also have I think it's a sprayed aluminium version as well, an early version, and then you have a camouflaged Ukrainian version with brighter yellow and blue markings on. The colour schemes are pretty interesting. Camouflage is quite interesting. There are a number of somber ones in here. I guess the aluminium one, and also a 2-tone aircraft that's grey and what looks like olive drab is kind of boring, but they do give you the option to have more interesting camouflaged versions within the kit. The Ukrainian one I rather like. I think that's going to be kind of a nice version to maybe have a look at and give us something different to run through MAI. Overall, I see very little pause for concern in this kit at the moment in the box. That's not to suggest that when I start putting this thing together, and it will be me that builds and paints this for MAI over the next couple of months or so, that I won't find anything that gives me problems. But at the moment, as it stands, it looks like a pretty competent kit. It looks as though Kitty Hawk have done, in the main, their homework to create something that models will enjoy. Now, I know from seeing online that there are slight shape issues with this thing, one of which is a curved underbelly, and it would appear that Kitty Hawk have misunderstood the shape of that section of the fuselage and have over accentuated it to the point where the whole fuselage kind of bends over, rather than just having a sweeping section underneath that runs from the front wheel bay all the way to the jet pipe. There are ways to correct that, and I have seen those online, so I may look into doing that. However, I think by putting pylons underneath that section and then putting stores under there, drop tanks in particular, that may well cover over that issue and may well remove the need for any kind of remedial surgery within that section. I'm not sure how I feel about cutting the kit up around the lower section to improve something that may well be almost invisible to most people. Don't know about that yet. The intake is an issue that needs to be dealt with one way or the other. I think I may take route of least resistance with that and go for the intake blank rather than trying to build a section within there and then kind of blend it in. It almost feels, if I do that, I'm working for very little reward within there, and unless somebody then peers in with a spotlight and looks into the intake, they're probably not going to see too much of that, and I'm not entirely convinced that I want to go down that road. So overall, having seen it this morning, I'm pleased with the way that this kit looks. I'm pleased with what's supplied, and I think it will be an intriguing project that will result in an impressive model. I've seen a few of these built up now, and they do look impressive. I'm certainly going to need to pre-plan ahead, and I've already started making notes as to the best route to do that. I mentioned earlier some of the problems with the intake. I forgot to mention, for instance, that within the nose here there are two pins that help to locate the nose. Instead of having a pin section in there that goes into a socket, what they've done is they've got an overlapping joint like that holds it in place. I guess the reason for that is because the nose will flex with that pin, whereas if they have something a bit more substantial, it'll hold it in place a little bit more. That is visible within the intake, so what I plan to do is I'll just mark that out with an orange pen, and before I start I'll use a micro chisel and cut away that section and then sand it smooth before I start. Or I'll just do what I said with the rest of the intake and cover it over, and then I can't see it. Issues that I've seen and noticed from a cursory look at this kit this morning are already kind of noted in my plans for it. I just look forward to getting started on it now. I think it's one of those things that I've been looking forward to taking a look at. Having seen fitters at Fairford last year, seeing them fly and taking lots of photographs of the real aircraft, I got a real liking for this big old brute of a machine. It's noisy, it's dirty, it's just cool looking. So really looking forward to doing that. I hope you enjoyed seeing my thoughts on this now. This is not a review, it's just a preamble to what we will do and the way we will look at it in MAI. But this hopefully will give you an indication of what I think of the kit, how I think it will look in the months to come. And as with everything, I'll certainly blog this as well. I'll take a load of detailed photographs of it so that you can see it and have a look at it online. We'll also preview it, I guess, in MII, or I'll just dive into the review and we'll just dive into the build next month, and then you'll see it and see how it looks. So thanks for looking in. Thanks to Andrew Hills for graciously sending us this kit. That is very much appreciated. He also sent us the Meng P51 that we built, so Andrew's generosity is shining through at the moment, so thanks very much for that. Thanks everybody for looking in, and hope you have a nice day, and I hope you look forward to seeing what I come up with Kitty Hawk's new Su-17. Take care of yourselves, I'll see you again soon. Bye.